In those days, there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. That is the very last sentence of the book of Judges, but honestly, it could have been the very first sentence in the whole book. And even though Judges was written centuries ago, it is a picture of what's still true for us today. When Jesus is not king, we will do whatever, whenever, however it seems right in our own eyes. And that is a recipe for disaster. Welcome to the book of Judges. The book of Judges is a fascinating, character-driven, action-packed, very intense book in the Old Testament. And Judges spans about 300 years of Israel's history and was written about 1,050 years before Jesus was on earth. Now, while the writer of Judges is not specified, Jewish tradition attributes authorship to the prophet Samuel. So when you hear the word Judges, maybe you think about a modern-day courtroom and jury, but really it makes more sense to think about a judge in Israel as a wartime leader or like a tribal chief. You see, the book of Judges tells the story of Israel after the death of Joshua. You remember him, he was Moses' apprentice, but before the anointing of the first king of Israel. That's King Saul. So because there was no king, that is, there was no strong spiritual leadership, everyone kind of did whatever they wanted. And as you might imagine, that does not turn out well at all. This was a difficult period in Israel's history, and it matches the same cycle we kind of see throughout the Old Testament. Things are calm and peaceful, but then the people of God start to turn inward, and they turn away from God, and they engage in sin, and they get all selfish, and they become complacent to all their God-given mandate to take over the promised land and subdue the enemies of God. So instead of winning against their enemies, they find themselves often harassed and losing ground to them. Why is that? Well, because they kept losing sight of what really matters, obeying God and creating the future with him. How do we know that? Well, because they didn't raise up the next generation to love and worship and serve God. Listen to what it says in Judges 2. After that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who neither knew the Lord or knew what he had done for Israel. You see, this verse essentially frames all the battles that we read about throughout the book of Judges. The physical battles fought against the enemies of God paint a picture of the spiritual battles that were actually being fought within themselves. Sure, they fought, the Canaanites and the Amalekites and all the other ites that they could fight, but at deeper levels, they were really fighting the internal enemies like the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. So the framework of Judges is fairly simple. The first two chapters, there's sort of this prologue that tell the story of Israel's initial possession of the promised land after the death of Joshua. Now, chapters 3 through 16, they are epic. They're full of conflicts and battles and mysteries and intrigue and victories and defeats. The entire center portion of the book of Judges is about 6 different judges or leaders who led Israel during those conflicts. You may recognize some of their names and stories, people like Gideon and Deborah and Ehud and Samson. And the final 4 chapters are pretty disturbing as we see Israel fully turn their backs on God and his ways, and they begin a civil war with the tribe of Benjamin, and they ultimately open the door for a lot of pain and suffering across the whole nation. So as you read Judges, I want to encourage you, look for the bold historic qualities that are worth emulating. See all the ways that God truly looks out for and leads his people. Observe as God uses ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary acts of courage and win these exceptional victories. And be extra thoughtful as you read about all the damaging effects of sin and disobedience across an entire people group. And over all that, as you read Judges, no matter what battle you're currently facing, may you experience more of Jesus, and may he speak to you the words that were spoken over Gideon. The Lord is with you, mighty warrior.